and welcome to Escaping Kasterborous, the podcast where we rewatch, reminisce, and review everything Doctor Who from 2005 to present. My name is Rich. I am joined by the one person who always takes every opportunity to pull rank in this house. It's Amy.
Okay, what? I got really confused by what you were referring to then.
Pulled rank in the house.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. I realised you
were
were referring to the dad in the episode, weren't you?
Yeah,
right.
We'll get there eventually.
Okay, yeah.
I was debating about whether to be like the person, I'm joined by someone who doesn't understand the concept of sharing food in public.
Well, I thought you were going to go with the person who's always hungry and just leave it at that.
Oh my,
that would have been so much better.
I suck at this. You know what? I was watching the episode, watching Ron Cook climb the Alexandra Palace transmitter and just thinking, how am I going to introduce Amy this week?
All the time she's there going, hungry.
She's there going, hungry. And it's like...
It's basically me. When I'm like sitting on the sofa and I'm like, hey Rich, I'm hungry. You want to feed me?
I think this is going to be the last episode of Escaping Kasterborous because I think we have to break up.
Cries.
I should have known.
You don't know me.
I don't know you.
I also don't really pull rank, let's be honest.
That's the joke.
Well.
Honestly, that meme of Radio Wolfcastle saying that's the joke is basically Amy and I's relationship in a nutshell of just me saying something and Amy's like, yeah, and explains it. And I'm like, yeah, that's the joke, Ames.
I know, nice. But it's more clarification for myself. That I understand what's going on.
You could say, Amy.
I'm very poorly. I'm very sorry.
Amy's poorly today. Don't worry, it's not the big C.
It's
not that big C. The other big C.
I just have a cold.
So we might. Actually, I was referring to COVID and cancer, not cold. But
yeah, no, that's what I understood that. I was just saying, I just have a cold.
It's a lowercase C. We'll go with a lowercase C.
A poorly cold.
So we might have this episode run a little bit shorter than normal, just for the sake of Amy's voice. Bless her.
Yeah, because it's not the best.
She's not used to spending days not talking. So I apologise if there's lots of coughing in the background. I will try my best to go through and cut them, but I don't usually have masses of time to actually, properly edit these things. As you know, if you're listening to this on release day, we are a little bit later than usual because last week we just had a lot of stuff going on. We genuinely, in our weekly schedule between us with work and my streaming and everything else, we genuinely have Wednesday nights to record this podcast.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
If we miss Wednesday night, it has to wait till next Wednesday. So that's, yeah. So I think we're going to run a little bit shorter tonight. But just going back before I started coughing, I was about to refer to you as being an idiot for not understanding things. And speaking of idiot...
Idiot's Lantern.
The Idiot's Lantern.
Yay.
Yay. Welcome to episode number 2 of Escaping Kasterborous Season 2. Kind of. But also episode number 7.
Oh, I was
7
close.
Of Series 2 of Doctor Who, written by one Mark Gatiss.
Got it, we're already on episode 7.
We are on episode 7. Bear in mind, obviously, we started 5 and 6 episodes in to Season 2 on this reboot.
Yeah, that's true.
And obviously we did them both together. And next week is a 2-parter too.
Yeah, I
say
thought
next
it was.
week, next time, I'm going to say...
Yeah,
because just in case,
we won't go next week because you said next week
we don't know.
Last time and it ended up being 2 weeks, so we'll just say next time.
I said next week the time before that and it was 6 months, lol.
Yeah, lol. So
yeah, but Mark Gatiss is back after contributing the definitely underrated Unquiet Dead in Series 1, and he's back again with the Idiot's Lantern in Series 2. And takes place in London in 1953, and you have the Wire using televisions to eat people's faces, etc., 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 etc. And first things first, I'm a realist, but also don't laugh at that.
Was awful.
I've lost my point now from making a bad joke.
You said first things first.
First things first. some people don't like this episode.
Why? I like it.
This is one of the episodes of Series 2 that people go, oh, this is one of the rubbish ones. And I'm like...
Is it?
Is it?
I wouldn't call it rubbish.
No.
I'd call it maybe not as, like, super strong as some of them.
Oh, yeah. It's no way like a top-tier episode in any way, shape, or form.
In terms of, like, its humour, in terms of its story, it's nice and simple to digest. Like, it's easy, funny.
Yeah, pardon.
It's easy to just kind of sit and take it in. And I think it's good. I think what they tried to do with it works really well.
An episode that implies that sitting in front of the television is bad is actually just good watching for just sitting and slumping in front of the television. Basically.
Yeah, basically.
We've gone full circle, Mark. You've done it. You've beaten the game.
Well,
the meta is real.
No, I quite enjoy this episode.
I do as well. It's kind of squeaky clean to some extent. There's not much to really get sort of up in arms about, I guess.
Yeah.
There's nothing to look at and really dig into and go, this is all really interesting and really a lot to unpack. It's kind of why with Amy being unwell, and it's like, we might do a shorter episode this week to sort of compensate. It's like, this actually has landed at the right kind of time.
Yeah.
There's enough to talk about with Idiot's Lantern, don't get me wrong. But it's not really one you can really dig into the characters of. Everyone sits very much on the surface.
Yeah, there's nothing like hidden.
There's no... I would say there's no... I mean...
There is depth, but it's depth that is like obvious
There's depth in the narrative.
Yeah.
But it is quite... I wouldn't say paper thin, because whenever you'd say something is paper thin or doesn't have any depth, you'd assume it's bad. Thing. But...
It doesn't need
Idiot's
to
Lantern
be.
It's fine. It's just sort of easy watching. It's like... It's almost a filler episode, but you don't kind of realise it's a filler episode. Because normally filler episodes stick out like a sore thumb. Boomtown, arguably, is a filler episode, but there's a lot more to that. There is a ton of depth to that episode.
Yeah.
And I think the people that go in expecting an Idiot's Lantern sort of depth, they're, the kiddie pool of Doctor Who, they miss all of the nuance that was in Boomtown. This kind of nuance you don't get in Idiot's Lantern.
Well, that's because it's not really necessary. Like, I think
exactly.
The point of Idiot's Lantern is that it's supposed to be a bit fun, a bit jovial, a bit kind of like running around, because, like, what episode was it last week? Rise of Cyberman Age of Steel.
Rise of Cyberman Age of Steel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, as much as there was stuff that they were doing, there wasn't tons of running in the last episode. Like, it was all quite well paced. It was all quite thought out, all quite like sort of structured. Whereas in this one, it feels
they also had a bigger time window. Well, to play with
obviously.
Two-parter.
But in this one, I kind of enjoy the kind of fun. Like, oh, look, we're in New York. No, we're not. We're in London. And then it's like, oh, something's going on. Oh, no, quick, let's find the nearest house and find out what's going on. And then it's just all kind of like...
It's sort of all go.
Yeah, which I quite like about it. I think it feels like very classic, like 2005, 2006 Doctor Who, as it should be. Kind of like, I miss that kind of running around jovial aspect of it sometimes.
Yeah, it's like, it's not an episode, as we've said, it's not an episode that makes you think a lot, but it's not an episode that you can, I say it's not an episode you can just sit and watch. It is an episode you can sit and watch, but there is, in terms of an analytical standpoint, which is obviously why we do this podcast and why we like going back and watching this, there's actually a reasonable amount to talk about Idiot's Lantern that I find really quite... Well, so I say this literally every week. It's something I love about doing this podcast, is going back and actually going through and working out what makes Doctor Who tick, basically. So obviously the episode set in episode is set in 1953. I'm just moving straight on. Set in 1953, just before Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. It's very... Oh,
sorry.
Bless you. Which, admittedly, in terms of coronation and stuff, we are literally, as of today, it was announced about the Queen's Platinum Jubilee next year. 4-day bank holiday weekend, Thursday to Sunday. Hells yes, provided she lives that long.
Yeah.
She'll be 96
wow.
when it rolls around. So she's doing well.
She ain't going anywhere at the moment, is she? So
no. Admittedly, if she didn't kick it straight after her husband, then she's we knew she was a strong woman, but something like that, it's quite it can kick you pretty hard when something like that happens. But anyway, back to the sort of fictionalized-ish queen in this. The first thing you really come up against in 1953 Britain is the fact that it is a very different era prior to Queen Elizabeth taking the throne. And the as much as there's a lot of stuff about the royal family at the moment that's not really relevant, there was a big shift within the royal family when Elizabeth took the throne, and there's a big shift in society as well. And one of the big things they lean into on this, which I bet you, if this episode, I think everything about this episode could easily be aired now.
Oh, easily.
Quite easily, without any any kickback, because it was a representation of what households were like back
at the time
in the 50s, because you have Mr. Connolly being this very brutish, hyper masculine arsewipe, quite frankly,
basically,
to his very, very timid, very quiet,
mousy,
but still very sharp wife, and his son, who is definitely a child of this new era that is coming with the coronation of the Queen. And they fully lean into the idea of, there's the whole scene of the Doctor sort of barging in, and there's the whole housework is a woman's job.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And obviously the Doctor transcending those sort of petty gender norms that Earth has. There's literally a line of that in the Capaldi era about, we're in advanced civilizations, we don't get mixed up in your squabbles about gender norms on Earth.
This is the thing, it's like when people are complaining about Jodie's era about it's too politically correct. I'm not being funny, but David Tennant literally just had a go at a man because he said housework was a woman's job. Like, it's not that Jodie's is more political, it's just that everybody nowadays is like, everything's too political.
They look out for it. They seek out the political commentary and they push it to the forefront.
Yeah. But no, I think this one was right on the nose, because it's like,
people deny the true sort of progressive nature of Doctor Who because it doesn't coincide, it doesn't correlate with their approach to life. It's why it's always pushed away. Like, obviously, as of yesterday, Pride Month has kicked in.
Yeah. Happy Pride, everybody.
Happy Pride. And there's obviously a ton of stuff going around. There's a load. I've ended up back into Doctor Who Twitter.
All right.
With seeing lots of just like all the memes and the stuff going on, and there's tons and tons of things about like Doctor Who and just like shipping random characters and implying that this person's bi and stuff like that. And honestly, I find it really funny because A, it's really cute, and B, I know it pisses people off. So I'm like, I'm all game for that. But somebody shared a picture of, there was Jodie in the center, and then there was 9, 10, 11, 12, and Ruth, Joe Martin's Doctor, sort of colorized all around.
Right.
It's like a fake poster, and I can't remember what the caption was, but it was something about like pride, whatever. And just people kicking off about like, it's all woke now, rah, 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 rah. And it's like, I know I've said this on Who Culture videos a million times. Like, you go back to Doctor Who in the bloody 70s, and it's political. Yeah. So the idea of it being political now,
it's not that it's woke.
Simply isn't the case.
It's just that people now have the term woke that they want to throw around because it makes them look big and clever, or they think it makes them look big and clever. It's like, being woke, the word woke is only ever used in a derogatory term, and people who are actually quote unquote woke will never use the word woke to describe themselves. And now woke doesn't sound like a word anymore because I've said it too much. But
the fact is, this whole thing, I mean, the whole dynamic between Mr. and Mrs. Connolly, Eddie and Rita, none of that really plays into the narrative of the episode massively. Obviously, the people being taken away, and Mr. Connolly trying to protect his inverted commas reputation by getting rid of the filthy monsters off his street, whatever. Like, that plays into it, but that isn't this. It's not the same as saying like climate change is going to end up being orphan 55, and if you keep using plastics, praxeus will happen, and blah blah blah. Like, none of that is relevant. This isn't necessarily pushing a political agenda. This is a representation of what it was like back then. Yes, it is quite amplified. It's a very sort of concentrated and slightly over the top representation, but that was how it was.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like I said to you when we were watching it, didn't I? I said the fact that, like, I understand that he is supposed to be kind of like the dominant male presence in the household, which is as it was at the time. But I like the fact that they didn't just leave it at this is acceptable, and they kind of pushed it to be that he was kind of like an exceptional case of being slightly abusive with his like dominance / power. And therefore they actually kind of twisted it around in the fact that it's like, just because this was how it was doesn't mean that's how it should be. And I think that is what ties it back in quite nicely to the modern approach to those kind of gender norms and gender stereotypes and stuff like that. And I know you said it doesn't play into the plot very much, but it does give us that amazing scene where the Doctor and Rose both absolutely trash
they tear
him
him to shreds, don't they? It's brilliant.
And that's always been one of my favourite scenes, is when he's like, what gender is the Queen?
Because it's irrelevant of the gender norms being enforced, it is still just an abusive character. If this were an alien planet in the year 3076 and you've got a feminine character being abusive to their masculine partner and their child, and the Doctor and the companion still went to town on this abusive character, you'd still have that same But you get that power shift between Rita and Eddie after the coronation, which again plays into this whole, this is a new era.
Yeah.
This is going. And this isn't a comment on this should be going. It's like, it's a comment on this did go. Well, to a pretty reasonable extent. Not enough entirely, but it was the start of something, a big change in society. And that's it's kind of reminds me of Thin Ice in series 10 with the 12th Doctor and Bill, when they go back to Victorian London and the Thames is frozen over.
Oh, and because she's
Bill
black.
Being black.
Yeah.
And that guy starts mouthing off and the Doctor just socks him one in the face. It's that same kind of dynamic. It's like, this isn't based in terms of being woke or making a political statement. It's like, this is literally just how the world was. And it's something that Doctor Who... I didn't really... I wouldn't have aligned this as much with Thin Ice and Rosa when Ryan gets punched by that dude, that white guy.
Oh, yeah.
At the beginning, because he picks up the woman's hat or something. Like, the Doctor Who was not afraid to represent the era as the era was. And it's something I've always respected Doctor Who for.
Definitely.
Obviously, they can't go too far. It's a family show, but
I think it's
skimp on the details.
Yeah,
really.
It's kind of like how Disney Channel back in like the early noughties, or sort of like early mid to noughties or whatever, when you had shows like That's So Raven commenting on racism, and show like, Disney Channel shows when we were kids were very, very good at social commentary in a way that kids would understand. And I think I think Doctor Who does it in a very similar way. And I think part of the reason why a lot of people of our generation grew up to be, not everyone, unfortunately, but the majority of the generation of us and the upcoming generations are much more acceptable, is because we grew up with TV shows like this episode of Doctor Who and like kids' TV shows teaching us that, certain things are just not okay, and like you shouldn't treat people any differently because of the colour of their skin or their gender or how they identify or their sexual orientation and blah blah blah, everything else, etc., etc. So I think this episode does it very well, and I think it's something that is worthwhile like including, despite the fact that it doesn't really impact on the overall plot of the episode.
Yeah, it makes it more interesting to watch. It adds a little bit more tension to the whole plot, aside from there being this weird alien TV woman trying to eat people's faces, which, to be honest, we should probably move on to.
Yeah. Given that's the main point of the episode.
Yeah. The Wire rocks up to Mr. Magpie, played by Ron Cook, who, honestly, I only ever see Ron Cook as Parker in the live-action Thunderbirds film.
Oh my god, I thought I recognised him.
It's literally like the only thing I'm like...
Oh, Jesus
The
Christ.
only thing I can think of, like, off the top of my head, that's the thing that I recognise him from the most of anything. Like, he was in The Witcher on Netflix,
right?
Very briefly, and he did a bunch of other stuff. But out of all the things I've seen, he's Parker and he's Mr. Magpie.
Incredible.
From
I was
Doctor
thinking,
Who.
you know, when you like, because obviously I've watched Doctor Who so many different times. You know, when you like recognise somebody and you think, do I recognise them because I recognise them in the other things, or do I just recognise them because I've watched this show far too much? And I was thinking, no, I probably just recognise them because I've watched this show like countless times. And then now you've said that, I'm like, oh my god, yeah, the Thunderbirds movie.
Just very quick segue. I unapologetically really enjoyed that Thunderbirds film from 2004. In the grand scheme of Thunderbirds, it's terrible.
Is that the one with Vanessa Hudgens?
Yes, playing Tintin.
Absolute killer.
They had to properly like rejig that character because it's a bit problematic. But
Bloody love
and
that
the Hood
film
as well, I think. But yeah, and also Busted did the film song, and Thunderbirds Are Go by Busted is an absolute tune.
Bop.
So
Absolute
anyway,
tune.
The Wire rocks up and Ron Cook's like, oh dearie me, oh no, and it creates this this very surreal representation of 1953, and something that, again, going into this podcast and rewatching it and really looking at things from a more media standpoint and actually having to analyze it, one thing that I'd never really seemed to notice about this episode is basically the entire thing is shot on a canted angle. Like, literally every single shot in this episode is tilted to give you this very... It's clever because obviously it's subtle because you don't really notice it until you see it.
Yeah, it's not super obviously done because like some Dutch angles can be like really on a thing. I think it's called a Dutch angle. Are you Googling it?
I'm just checking that.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is a Dutch angle, Dutch tilt, canted angle.
The only reason I know that is thanks to Dan Nerd Cubed because he mentioned it. What was he talking about? I can't remember, but he was talking about something where it might have been in his F Yeah Doctor Who podcast. I won't obviously say the full title of that, but he mentioned the Dutch angle, and I was like, "Oh, is that what it's called?" Googled it. So thanks, Nerd Cubed, for teaching me about camera stuff.
I remember the first time I ever used a canted angle in filmmaking because, in case you don't know, I mean, I've seen people who watch this will understand that I've come from a media background, and I've done a lot of filming and stuff, and I still do now. I think I've said this before, I went to Cardiff in 2007 for a Blue Peas competition called My Movie, and I remember being there. We were shooting a short film in Cardiff in the Millennium Centre.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we've had this conversation on the podcast before because didn't you mention screaming?
Yeah, the girl screaming into the iMac microphone because we didn't have a screaming sound effect. But when we were shooting, we had to do a couple of shots of this girl running from one end of the Millennium Centre to the other, and the guy who was helping us out, it was one of those moments that it's so obvious now, and I remember seeing him do it and my mind just went kaboom. Oof. Like, he just literally unclipped one of the tripod legs and just tilted the camera, and I was looking at the back of the camera, the screen, and I was like, that's so cool, because I'd never ever
thought to do it.
Thought of doing stuff like that, because it's always been a case of like tripod, boom, that's that. You don't do any more with it than what you do there. And literally that guy, I've got no idea what he was called, cannot remember for the life of me, got no clue what he's doing now, whether he probably came from the BBC in some way, shape or form. But he taught me one of these little things that I've just used forever, like shooting B-roll for reviewing a steering wheel at work. I have been messing around with tripods and putting them in ridiculous places. And this guy teaching me how to do a canted angle sparked that entire
Somebody's got to teach you how to do it, though, haven't they? Because
so thank you to that guy.
Well, you've got to pick
whoever you may be
somewhere.
But yeah, everything, like pretty much like 95% of every shot in this episode, up until the point where the Wire is defeated, is shot on a canted angle. And you don't realize, when you notice it, you realize just how peculiar everything looks. It's like coming from Age of Cybermen and Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel.
Yeah.
Where, as Mickey says, everything's the same but a little bit different. Shooting stuff on a canted angle is like that. This is everything about this, apart from the weird talking television and the faceless people. Everything else about this visually is the exact same as how you'd expect it to look in 1953.
Yeah.
Imagine taking something like the aesthetic of The Empty Child in Series 1, how convincing that Blitz London looked like, and just tilt the camera a bit. And it just makes everything look a little bit stranger.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so
they
simple,
do
it
it in
so well.
The Empty Child. They do have that kind of...
They do have a couple of...
Yeah, going down the hallway and stuff, don't they?
They have the shot where it sort of swings around, doesn't it? But yeah, the whole that you get... I think it's because you get acclimatized to the fact that the whole thing's shot on an angle.
I was going to say something, I can't remember what it was.
You really notice it.
I think it was... I think it goes some way into kind of making it almost seem dated. Because for some reason I feel like I believe that it's the 60s, not the 60s, sorry, start that again.
The 50s.
I believe it's the 50s, more so when I see the Dutch angles for some reason. And I don't know if it's because I'm used to seeing this episode and so it just feels natural when I watch the episode because that's how it is. But like you said, when you notice it, it's kind of like, oh, that's a bit odd. Why did they do that? But it also goes some way to sort of, you realise it and then you notice it for like 5 minutes and then you forget about it again. So I think it's really easy to kind of like just accept that that's just... But there are some shots that are really obviously different, like when they, for example, probably stick a GoPro in the top corner of the ceiling in the house and like everything is blurry and a little bit distant. Those shots are slightly...
They are the more different shots. It's just I think it only happens really in the house, or it happens in the house predominantly. I think they use it a bit as like an establishing shot because it's such a strange establishing shot. They really push that weird aesthetic. And obviously you do have a couple of shots that are relatively normal. And then as said, once the Wire is defeated, everything goes level again. It was something I was watching for afterwards. I'm pretty certain every shot, as soon as the Wire's gone, nothing is canted again, except for the point where Rita forces Eddie out of her house.
That one was.
Those shots are still... You get that establishing shot high up, and then you get the couple of canted shots inside. As soon as it moves back outside when he's left, that's it.
I think
straight again.
Also they do the shots from the ceiling because it's a very clever way to get them, like when the granny's knocking on the floor upstairs or the door or whatever. It's a very clever way to sort of show them looking up.
Everyone is reacting to it and hearing it at the same time by getting them all in frame at once.
And it does make you feel very like fly on the wall, kind of voyeuristic look at this family and what they're like dealing with when you're just kind of trapped in the corner of the ceiling, as opposed to like being level and seeing their heads like go from your height to like upwards. You can actually see like everything as if you were already kind of upstairs looking through the floor, which I think works quite well.
You're being thrown around and kind of disoriented, which is, the kind of idea in this whole episode to make things, like I said, everything's familiar, but it's also really peculiar. It's like when you're drunk and you're walking around your house and everything's spinning. It's kind of trying to push that idea
a little
across.
bit. But you said downstairs, didn't you, that it was that idea of like familiar but different was because of the fact that they didn't want kids to stop watching TV or whatever.
So obviously with Doctor Who, they played up on it a ton throughout the course of the show's history, and they take something normal and they make it scary. You've got shop window dummies. You've got things like gas masks. You've got shadows later on. You've got statues in Series 3. This episode's like, let's make TV scary.
How about no?
Now, obviously, in terms of the narrative, the coronation is an integral part because it gives the Wire the audience she needs to feed and blah, 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 blah. So it makes a lot of sense to use that. But if they'd have taken this episode, this concept of this alien coming in via lightning and using television to feast on humanity and succeed in their evil plan or whatever, if they'd have set that in a modern day and they made kids afraid of TVs in the same way they made kids afraid of statues and shadows and stuff like that, making kids afraid of TVs is a bit counterproductive for a show that exists
on TV
through television. Yeah. So I don't know whether this might just be me overanalyzing it, and there's probably a very good chance that it is the case. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they set this back in 1953 when TVs were very, very new and they are very, very, very different to how they are now, it created enough of a disconnect for kids to be like, this is a scary villain and a scary idea, but my TV doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's okay. Obviously, back in 2006, I can't tell you exactly what kind of TV that the family had in 2006.
Oh my God, I can. Do you want to know what my family TV looked like? It was...
Was it a Shrek one?
Huge. No, sadly not.
So I'm not interested then.
It was huge, for first off. It was like... I mean... How big is a TV? Do you know what I mean? But it's, when I say huge, I mean depth, not width. Like,
no, it was a thick boy.
So it was quite big width-wise as well. As far as I remember, we had a decent sized, probably 20 or so inches maybe on the TV. Yeah. Because obviously everything went through a phase of getting bigger, then smaller, now bigger again. This was in the point where everything was getting bigger for the first time, and it was grey, and it was like proper plasticky old grey, that it was like around the edges, and it was really deep, and it sat on top of a grey TV stand.
Was it a proper CRT?
I've got not a clue.
Was it like really, really fat?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was huge.
Like, did it take a moment? Did it take a bit of time to warm up when you turned it on?
Maybe, I'm not sure, but in any case, it was big, it was chunky, it was proper thick with 3 C's. It was,
oh boy, that's a thick ass boy.
It was old, and I mean, it did the job, but it was in our house for a long time, and I remember when we swapped it for like a flat screen, and it was like, oh my God, this is like incredible.
I'm trying to think of what kind of TV we would have had.
Sorry.
Oh, bless you. I'm not entirely sure what it would have been. I remember having the TV that I had at university in our second year.
Oh my God, I remember that.
Was like, I think it was my family's first flat screen. And by flat screen, it's like inverted commas flat screen, because it was like an LCD. But the TV depth itself was still pretty thick. It was a good like maybe 7 or 8 inches thick. Mm-hmm. So it might have been something like that. Maybe. I don't know whether it was HD. It probably wasn't.
No.
It might have been 720 at a push. But it might have been something like that. But anyway, like, obviously classic wood grain, arguably gorgeous televisions from the 1950s versus your silver/grey CRT, the ones with the built-in VCR underneath.
Oh yeah, ours had a built-in VCR.
Everyone had one of them.
I had one in my bedroom. I had a small TV in my bedroom with a built-in VCR.
Yeah. With like... It's similar enough. You can see where it's gone. It's different from like TVs in 2021 versus TVs in 1953, not 2006. Like there's enough of a difference there for kids to not be afraid of it. But I just thought, maybe that's why it's set so far back rather than being set with something so familiar as a TV to scare kids away from it and therefore potentially lose viewership. It might be, like I said, this could be me overthinking it. Most likely is.
I mean, kids are scared of anything. Like my mum bloody hid behind the pillow at Scooby-Doo when she was younger. Like my sister hid behind the pillow at Mr. Chips when she was younger. Like still does. I think
we've had this discussion already.
Yeah, my sister hates Mr. Chips from Catchphrase.
Catchphrase is great.
Sorry, Laura. Just outing you. But yeah, so I mean, kids will be afraid of anything, so I can understand why they wouldn't want kids to be afraid of televisions.
And obviously, leaning into TVs is like everyone has one, so let's do that. It's like making kids afraid of radio, but then again, you only really listen to radio in the car, or you get Alexa to tell you to ask it to listen to the radio. That's about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's one of the. It's like taking a common thing, trying to make it scary. Idiot's Lantern. I say it doesn't achieve it. It works well enough in its context to work as an episode, but it's not going to leave you afraid of them. Like people, as I said, people were afraid of statues.
I'm more scared of the woman. than the TV.
People afraid of shadows.
Like, the woman's well creepy. I mean, whoever the actress is does a phenomenal job, because I literally am like...
Maureen Lipman.
I'm like, don't come near me, ever, if I see you in the street. I'm walking the other way. Like, please don't.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about. She has the right voice, and they did the right sort of things to her. The way that they made her voice sound like it was coming from a speaker, it sounded so perfectly 1950s. There's something about music and television and how things sounded back then that is so distinct.
Yeah.
And it's something I've always wanted to try and master, because as much as like on Adobe Audition, it's like, here's a thing that makes it sound like it's coming from a TV. It's like, yeah, but it's not the right kind of TV. It's like hearing the chorus in the background of a Glenn Miller song, or how every single old Disney film started with that same chorus, that like
choir,
of blokes, like at the beginning of like Peter Pan, and it always sounds the same.
Like
as like really
Sleeping Beauty
really discreet
and
thing.
Cinderella and like films like that were all very I know what you mean. It's very
they
60s,
absolutely nailed
isn't it? Weirdly, like very 50s, very 60s.
It's mid 20th century, and they nail. She nails her voice in that. Obviously, she is older, so she is from that kind of era. But they made it so convincing, like to the extent that when I remember first watching this and thinking, did they get somebody in to act like someone who was on the TV
at
back
the time?
then?
Yeah.
And obviously, I think it's meant to be just this. This is a representation of how things were with like sort of presenters. And, are we sitting comfortably? Now we'll begin. That's like a very given thing from television back in that era.
Yeah.
And she plays it really well. She's pretty creepy, and obviously, we've already spoken about Eddie and Rita, played by Jamie Foreman and Deborah Gillett, or Gillett, something.
Probably.
They do really well. One person we haven't spoken about yet is Tommy. Played by Rory Jennings, who is obviously this, who's the son who stands up to his father on more occasions and becomes more confident.
Am I allowed to say he's attractive, or is he too young?
I think by now he is probably going to be old enough. He's 37 now.
I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, I was obviously younger than him.
You were
when
11.
The show aired.
We were 11 when that came out.
But can say now, attractive. I quite like the look of him. And speaking of liking the look of people, when David Tennant pops his head out the TARDIS and he come around with that hair, and me and Rich both we got
pretty far through with that before talking about David Tennant with his hair up. Yeah,
he was.
Rose, bless her. Rose is very much on it this episode. She seizes every opportunity to bash down Mr. C, and I don't blame her. That very comedic bit when she says that you're flying the Union flag upside down, and then grins and then dashes out of frame. It's very cartoony and very silly.
See, this is what I like about this episode. It's the humour. It's like I pointed out to you, didn't I? In that scene in the inspector's office, when
Tennant's captured.
Tennant is captured, and the inspector's like, "Tell us everything you know from the start." And he goes, "Well, I know you can't wrap your hand around your elbow and make your fingers meet." And then in the background, when the inspector's talking, the guy in the suit is actually like very slowly reaches over to his elbow and puts his hand around his arm.
Spotted that.
And I was like, oh, I love this bit because the guy does this, and you were like, wait, does he? And you had to rewind it to check, and I've always noticed it, and I always find it really funny.
I've never noticed that.
I love it.
That's brilliant.
So if you didn't notice, just hop back and go to the scene where David's in the inspector's office and just watch the guy in the suit behind him, and he reaches around his elbow, and it's quite funny.
Tommy feels like this very... He feels like the sort of vessel to merge together the narratives of his mum and dad, or his dad kicking off at his mum, and the events of the episode going on. He is that bridge. And some people didn't enjoy his character, and I can kind of understand that. He's not the case. You kind of root for Tommy, but you don't... I wouldn't say you don't care for him, but I think there are other characters that are introduced in other episodes that I think you get a lot more attached to, like Mrs. What's-it from last time. What's her name in Age of
Mrs. Moore.
Age of Steel? Mrs. Moore. Like that whole section in the cooling tunnel, and you really start to feel for her. You don't... I mean, this might just be me. I don't think you get that same thing with Tommy.
I don't think it's as prominent, but I think that's...
Admittedly, he doesn't die.
No, well, that's the thing. I think it's probably because there's no immediate danger throughout. Like, I mean, there is danger obviously through the episode, but
they do get close to being. It's not sucked up by the wire.
Yeah, but it's not death as we know it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is obviously traumatic, but there's no death in this episode, and I think that is
apart from Mr. Magpie.
Well, yeah, obviously, unfortunately,
he's the only one who dies.
But I think that's maybe why you don't have that kind of similar connection to the characters in this episode, because there's no instant kind of, oh my god, everyone's going to die. It's like, now they're just going to be turned into faceless, like, layabouts, really, which is obviously a shame and, like, really disappointing. But, I mean, I like Tommy. I think his character's really good. I think he's obviously very clever. I
think he's portrayed well.
Yeah, definitely.
The fact that he saves the day at the end by replacing the bulb on the Doctor's Betamax recorder.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I said to you, I headcanon that Tommy ends up like living 30 years and ends up going on to invent the VCR. But that's just me.
It's a running thing in Tennant's era. Is just I'm gonna keep inventing stuff earlier than I probably should do.
Yeah.
But,
which I quite like.
The hell? Yeah, it's fun. It's stupid. I love it to bits.
But no, I like Tommy's character.
Obviously, Rose keeps on top of things. She's ahead of the Doctor on this one because the Doctor goes chasing the car again, even though he knew it disappeared the first time, and it disappeared again, and he loves that. Rose obviously finds that it's Magpie and goes investigating herself, which, you know what? I think because she's come from this abusive household, she is like adamant she wants this to be over, so she will just go ahead and do it. I think in any other situation she might have gone like, I'm gonna hang fire and wait for the Doctor, maybe, just because she knows that things can be dangerous. She is a very strong character. Don't need to tell you that twice. I think
part of the reason why she goes investigating by herself is because it's on Earth and she knows it's on Earth, and so as much as being on Earth in the past hasn't always done her like the best, she's probably thinking, oh, it's 1953 Britain, like, you know, as much as there seems to be something wrong, I can't imagine going to see a man about a television is gonna get me into any danger.
Welp,
lol,
famous last words.
But she's probably thinking that she has a bit more jurisdiction and a bit more kind of she's probably more comfortable in this, which is why she's not like rushing to go after the Doctor when he's like, come on Rose, we're going to lose them again. And obviously she sees the thing from the electrical,
the back of the TV,
signal-y, glittery, sparkly majigger thing. And she's like, huh, that seems strange. And then the Doctor's off and she's like, yeah, okay, that was weird, gonna see what that's about. So she probably does it for those reasons, but also I think she's kind of got to that point where she's been traveling with the Doctor for a while, and it's like really she's getting to the point now where she can sort of figure things out for herself because she's starting to think similarly to him. And obviously Tennant's Doctor points it out in this episode when he says, oh, of course she no, it wasn't that, it was when he's walking along the street with Tommy and he goes, oh, she noticed it as soon as we got here. It's the fact that they've all got aerials and and it's that kind of leap that
there's a mutual trust between the two. Hence why, you know, as much as obviously in only the episode prior, or the story prior, that he's like, you know, you can't tell humans anything because they just go off and do what they want. But obviously whatever's happened in between those two, that two-parter and now, there's much more trust, and they will feel more comfortable because the Doctor doesn't have Mickey around anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, and just very quickly on the Doctor, the fact that I love getting to see the fire behind the Doctor, behind any Doctor when their companion's in trouble. You can tell that care the Doctor has, that love he has for Rose is so present here, with just how quickly his demeanor changes when he realizes that it's Rose. Like, it doesn't feel like there is much at all of any sorrow. Like, I think the Doctor feels like he's past that point with Rose.
Yeah,
there's not going to be a, oh, I'm sorry, oh, I'm so sorry, kind of like how it was in Dalek when the Doctor thinks Rose is dead.
Yeah,
and there's a much longer sequence of him being much more somber, and then he kicks off. In this, there is no hesitation. He is off.
Because he's been with her for long enough now that he's like, if anybody hurts her, I'm going to kill you, basically. And I think that's probably really kind of important that they get that across, because it shows that their dynamic is starting to shift as like a pair as well as like individual characters. So no, I totally get it, because let's be honest, if it's not like, I think the difference is as well is that she's not dead, so he can see her in front of him and he's like, this isn't right, like this is my Rose, like what have you done to her? And that is the kind of anger that comes from knowing that she's still there but isn't there. And you get that anger in that first bit, but then you get a very kind of hint of sorrow when they go to the TV shop and he sees her face on the screen and she's screaming doctor, very obviously screaming doctor, and he's like, I'm on my way, I promise. And it's like, despite the fact that at that point in the episode you don't know that everything's going to be fine and everyone's going to go back to normal, I think it's, I mean, I don't know whether it's because I've watched the episode before and therefore know that everything goes back to normal, or whether it's because of the fact that it's a more jovial kind of fun, like light-hearted episode, that you kind of assume that everything's gonna be like back to normal and everybody's gonna be fixed, like
everybody lives, Rose.
Well, except Magpie, lol.
Except Magpie.
But it's like, yeah, you kind of get that in that what's the word I'm looking for? You kind of have that assumption when he's saying to Rose, like, I'm on my way, that it's like, oh, so obviously there's gonna be some sort of like rectifying, like,
it was going to be all sorted out by the end of the episode. So that kind of brings us back to that sort of initial question, or the initial thing we talked about was the idea of people don't necessarily like this episode. And to go over to the Twitters at Kasterpod, I asked the question about questions, actually.
Woohoo.
And Peter got in touch and asked whether we feel that this is a throwaway episode or a hidden gem. And they said, I've never felt partial to it personally. And I think we kind of answered that at the beginning, or at least for me personally, it's not either throwaway or hidden.
I was going to say,
it's just kind of there. As I said, it's filler to the extent that it does enough to not feel blatantly like filler. It's good enough. It's not great. It just does what it needs to do, and fair enough.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was bad by any stretch. Like, it's definitely not a bad episode.
There have been worse episodes overall, and there have been episodes that have been equally as sort of competent but have had much more negative parts. I'm looking at Aliens in London World War 3 and all the fart jokes. Otherwise, it's good stuff, and I think this is still good enough.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say it. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was purely sort of filler, but I also wouldn't say it was like super hidden gem. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's in the middle. It's a good enough episode to sort of lightheartedly sit down, watch it, enjoy it, go on to the next week.
It's better than having a really bad episode that tried to be a really good episode.
Yeah.
Which, we get a lot of that in the future.
Yeah, like if you were doing as we are, if you're doing a watch through, I wouldn't be sat there thinking, oh God, I've got to watch Idiot's Lantern. Like, I'd just be sat there going, oh, it's Idiot's Lantern next week. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
SPMI 2.0, no idea how to say that. Spammy. Hello, Spammy. Not really a question, but has said that the kid in Idiot's Lantern, i.e. Tommy, also played Davros in Big Finish's I, Davros, and asked us to give it a shout out. Now, I, Davros is actually one of the few Big Finish things I've been really like, I should really listen to this, because you know me, I'm a big Dalek fan. And I remember reading about I, Davros when I was at uni, and I just never got around to listening to it. But it's all about Davros' sort of origin story, but I think it takes place, it was released way before Magician's Apprentice, and which is in series 9.
Oh, the one where Capaldi saves that kid or what have you.
That is Davros.
Yeah. Spoilers, lol, sols.
Yeah, it's reached that point now where I'm like, I don't really want to do major spoilers, but I'm pretty certain people who are listening to this have watched Doctor Who before. I mean, if you are listening to this and you haven't seen all of Doctor Who, tweet us at Kasterpod and let us know.
Yeah.
Because I want to say that 99 out of 100 listeners have watched all of this before.
But also, if you are worried about spoilers, then it's already like however many years old. So, but there's a point where you have to kind of be like, yeah, sorry, it's a little bit late for that now.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah, but anyway.
But yeah, I Davros is something we should definitely listen to. Misha asks whether we'd like to ever see the Raya return. If so, then how? And if not, then why not?
No. Because it's a very one-dimensional character. Like their only trope is I'm hungry, feed me, and it's kind of like once you've done that, where do you go from there? Like how else do you feed them? How else do you and where else could they really end up? Like I know that he sort of said like, oh yeah, it's trapped. Maybe I'll tape over it. Blah blah blah. But yeah, I feel like there's not really a lot else you could do with it. Like it came to Earth kind of because it was exiled or it was meant to be executed something. And it's kind of like once you've done that and then done this, what else do you do with it? Like there's not really much further you could go.
The only way you could bring back an enemy, an adversary like this character is if you did it in a slightly different way, in the same way that the clockwork robots from Girl in the Fireplace sort of technically came back in Deep Breath in Peter Capaldi's debut. Like it's kind of the same thing, but it's not the same thing. And the only really way you could go further with this is the idea that you explore where the characters come from, what race it was, because obviously that's all completely left in the dark. But I think as we've discussed before, and I'm sure we will get to when it gets around to like the Weeping Angels, some of that stuff just doesn't need to be explained. Just leave it in the dark.
Yeah.
Same with, actually, it's not even just the Weeping Angels, it's the bloody Doctor. Leave it in the dark. It doesn't need to be explored.
Yeah, we did not need that, Chibnall.
Basically, Misha, no. Don't think the wire should
the only
come
thing
back.
that kind of you could do with it, which I feel like Doctor Who has already done, is target Wi-Fi. And
well, it did that.
Yeah, exactly.
That was St. John.
That's what I mean.
Did Wi-Fi.
Doctor Who has already done that. So
Wi-Fi bad.
It's kind of internet bad, TV bad.
Finally, D-Harv 2K1 asks, if you were to get stuck in hell only watching one TV show, what would it be and why?
Oh, Jesus Christ, I hate questions like this.
It wouldn't be Doctor Who, honestly. Would not be Doctor Who. To me, probably the one I've watched the most over and over and over again. No, The Simpsons.
Oh, right, okay, fair enough, yeah.
It'll be The Simpsons for me.
I honestly don't think I have anything that I would watch over and over again because there's nothing that I solely enjoy so much to the point, well, obviously the question is you're in hell, so I guess the point is that you won't enjoy it, but I guess the thing is to kind of pick like something with so many episodes and so many series that you wouldn't necessarily get bored of it, but you would get bored of anything. This is why I hate questions like this, because I think about it too much. And I'm like, oh my God, it hurts my brain.
Yeah.
But so
that's why I'm just like, yeah, it'd be The Simpsons.
Okay,
it's the one TV show that I've watched over and over again the most.
If I had to pick out a show out of the blue, it would probably be Glee. Because I don't hate Glee. The songs are acceptable. Blaine is the mega hottie. I love Darren Criss. He's absolutely
and the narrative is
beautiful.
Interesting too.
Yeah, there's a lot of good episodes. There's a lot of crap episodes, but you kind of got to take the good with the bad. So probably Glee, even though not, but yeah.
Glee and The Simpsons. Funnily enough, on a podcast all about Doctor Who, a show that both of us love, we wouldn't pick Doctor Who to be the show to be stuck with the rest of our lives. Unfortunately. But yeah, there we go. That is about where we'll wrap up today for the Idiot's Lantern. We're not too far off an hour, to be honest.
I was just looking at that, yeah.
What are you going to do?
Apologies for my poorliness in the background, but...
Hopefully by next time Amy's will be clear, but knowing Amy, no, probably
Well,
not.
this is the first time I've been ill in well over a year. Like, literally since we went on lockdown from COVID, I have not had... That is in lockdown 1. I'm talking like March 2020.
Yeah.
I have not had any shred of a cold. Like, I've had minimal smidges of like a cough where I've gone, oh my God, is it COVID? And gone, no, it's literally just a tickle in the back of my throat. This is the first time I've been genuinely like ill with a cold since then. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so like, I hate it. I don't like being poorly. So fingers crossed. I mean, it is on its way out, but the cough is just lingering a little bit. But I've got my Calpol, so we're all good.
Hey, it's good stuff. And she's going to set herself off again. I thought, yeah, there she goes. But yeah, thank you all very much for listening. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, I should say.
Episode.
Next time, we are going up against another two-parter so soon. We are going to be doing The Impossible Planet and The Satan Pit.
Oh, well, this is a good one.
The first appearance of the Ood and the Beast.
Oh, my God.
And what's his name? Toby. Ooh,
oh, yeah.
Creepy stuff.
Toby.
So make sure if you are watching along with us to watch both of those episodes together, because as said, as you've already probably heard with Rise of the Cybermen Age of Steel, we're doing two-parters as one episode now.
Because it's so much easier.
So that will be next time. Whether it'll be next week or week after next, we will keep you in the loop. Please follow us on Twitter at Kasterpod. And any questions you have regarding the Impossible Planet and Satan Pit, then please send them to us at Kasterpod. Simple as that. It's the easiest place. It's the only place you can really send them in now because we're not on YouTube anymore.
No.
Please send them in there. I will do a little tweet on the day of on next Wednesday, or the day that we do definitely record.
Next time.
To be like, yo, let's do this.
But if you're listening and you want to look out for it Wednesday after 6 p.m, because that is when we sit down to like watch the episode, because we cook, we sit down while we eat, and then we record after dinner.
We immediately
so if you want to tweet us a question, make sure it's by Wednesday on 6 p.m, and whether it's next Wednesday or the Wednesday after, we will still see it.
Just send us it at Kasterpod. We'll see it. So don't miss out on getting your questions in about that big old two-parter. But that'll be about where we wrap up this evening. Amy's going to go and fill her face with Calpol.
I'm going to go and die.
Preferably not too much, and don't do that either. That's sad. Please don't.
I'm not. I'm just going to go and take some painkillers and just sleep.
And fall asleep. I'm probably going to play some video games.
Video games.
Video games indeed. Thank you all very much for listening.
I was going to say watching, weekend. So my brain was out.
Have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you next time for Impossible Planet and Satan Pit. Amy, where can they follow you?
They can follow me stuff? On Instagram at Ames_Elizabeth for my day-to-day normal account, or at Amy Cakes Baking for my baking stuff.
You can follow me on Twitter at PickUpChangeToe, and also just the general podcast at Kasterpod, as we've said. Until we see you again, be good.
Take care.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.